Hello, welcome back. I'd like to, now that we've talked about fire ecology, the why, and we've talked about the what, which is fire behavior, and then finally the how, implementing a prescribed burn, that all focuses on orchestration, which means movement, which means activity. And it's hard to show that via slides or PowerPoint and those sorts of tools. So what I want to do now is I want to present to you a video that we've made of a prescribed burn, starting from the very beginning of the prescribed burn, going all the way through to the end, and a little bit of the mop-up. And I'd like to show that to you and kind of narrate it. There's a visual part of the narration that's sort of self-narrated, but I'll give comments as we go along. And I hope you find that useful in taking the static parts that I've given you about how to implement a prescribed fire, and I hope that that helps you kind of make that live and breathe a little bit more. And we'll see how that goes. Um, and I apologize for the quality of the imagery. The drone that we used, the camera wasn't functioning quite right, so that the imagery itself isn't very good. But the overall footage, I think, is really quite spectacular in terms of how it depicts a prescribed fire. So I hope that you can overlook the image quality and focus on the content, because I think you'll find that quite useful. So with that, I will share my screen and load that video. So this is a video that we did. This was the last burn that we did in 2020 before COVID shut everything down. And so the first part of any prescribed burn is to do a briefing with your crew. So the circle depicts our crew gathered, and I present to them the map of the burn that we are going to do. And the discussion involves a variety of topics, as you see listed. Crew introduction, so people just know each other. Assigning the leadership responsibilities. So in this case, we have 2 line squads and me as the fire boss. And so those the line bosses are assigned, and each of the crews are line assignments are made so that people in each of the 2 crews know what crews they will be on, so that when we walk the breaks, they pay particular attention to the line that they are going to be on. We identify what the burn objectives are, the location of the unit on the map in terms of a general landscape situation that the unit is within, as well as the unit specifically, and break locations, and so on. But then, of course, we actually walk the break. So everybody knows precisely where those breaks are. And they know exactly where the breaks are, and we get a chance to see what the weather conditions are doing on those breaks as well. So that's a fairly important thing to do as you're moving along. I'm going to move this out of the way here. Now notice that people are carrying cubes of water. Those are 5-gallon jugs of water. So we're placing pre-positioning extra water out on the site in places where we think we will need them. And here I'm stopping and going to make a comment on what we see for wind direction. And I'm talking about the wind direction, pointing where it's coming from and where our point of origin is planning on being. And we also are carrying extra drip torch fuel along the lines as well. And you'll see occasionally people will stop. My other burn bosses are stopping, and they're checking what the wind is going to be. So we're all paying attention to what's happening on this unit as we walk the breaks. And I find it really very useful because you get a chance to understand the idiosyncrasies of a particular site as you're walking it. And I find that very, very useful. It's also a chance to point out hazards, or in this case, the fire break is going to change direction. So we want to point out that change of direction and how it affects fire behavior. I'm throwing up grass to verify what wind directions are occurring to see if our point of origin makes sense. And we're just talking about that burn in general. So we're talking about resources, hazards, and contingencies. So what happens if the fire escape? Where is our major highway? Where is access? Where is the emergency vehicle to come? Where our vehicle is located? Are the keys in the car? Those are the sorts of things that we're talking about. when we're talking about hazards and contingencies. Now note we're dropping one cube here at the corner, and we're going to kind of drop it back off the fire line, but that cube will stay here, and that will be a pre-positioned water. We're just sharing it, so not everybody is schlepping stuff, and we're walking on. So we're going to walk the entire perimeter of the break. I'm a real fan of having everybody walk all the breaks, because you never know if we're going to move one person from one break to another break, or one line to another line. So I think everybody should know what's going on. Here we're stopping and taking a look where there's a fair amount of fuel that's right next to the break, and talking about that. And we left a cube there because if we needed water, that's a place where we might have a spot fire, and we're leaving that extra cube. Of course, anytime crew can ask questions, they can talk about why we're doing what we're doing, testing the weather. You'll see my line boss, Joe Lacey. He's going to be starting to test the wind direction up there. I'm talking about how to extinguish fire on a grass break, the risks that are inherent in a grass break, and how you might want to conserve water so that we don't go through as much water. You can see our 2 extra drip torch fuel containers. Those are the red cans. And we're just talking about various things. So here's Joe throwing up vegetation and looking at what the wind's doing, pretty much still getting a westerly blow to the wind. And that's what we're planning on for our point of origin. And so one of the crew members is asking a question and talking about if we were at the point of origin or not. And we're going on. For the purposes of this burn, we kept the burn to about 5 acres in size, so it wouldn't take too long to kind of illustrate all the various components of what we're doing. And so now the crew is coming up to a point of commitment. That's where I'm standing on the corner. So that's essentially the northwest corner of the unit. And we'll leave 5 gallons of drip torch fuel. We'll leave another cube to make sure people can refill their cans. And this is our point of commitment. And we're still planning on a westerly wind, which you see with that arrow. So our tie point is going to be at the point farthest upwind, which would be roughly where this circle is. So that's what we're talking about, that this is a point of commitment, what needs to happen by the time that we're ready to leave that point of commitment. And we'll talk about that a little later in the video. And then we'll point out where the point of origin, the tie point is going to be. And so this is that northwest corner. We're kind of looking west as well as downward, and to give you some orientation as far as what the group is doing. So now we have illustrated the point of commitment. The point of commitment 1 is just where we're standing now. The other line will have a point of commitment, and that's point of commitment number 2. And so those 2 places are where we're going to be. You're seeing where the point of origin is, what the planned wind direction is, where the tie point is, which is at the point farthest upwind, and then the 2 points of commitment. And so those are the outlines, or the overall strategy of this prescribed burn that we're talking about while walking the break. The 2 lines go in 2 different directions. They stop, or at least at the point of commitment, they have to make sure they're ready to tie, and then they move to tie. And that is the overall ignition strategy for this prescribed burn. Now we'll finish up. The crew is finished walking the breaks. We don't show you the other side, but they walk the entire perimeter of the break. We're returning to the point of origin, and this is the weather that we had on site. Our maximum wind speed was 6.9 miles per hour, and the average was 4. So the winds aren't very gusty. Our wind direction was west. We had no clouds, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and relative humidity of 38%. And so the next thing that we're going to do, and this is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and so we make the final, each of the lines have been identified, and the crew memberships and the line bosses or the squad bosses will make their further assignments within each of their squads or within each of their lines, and then we're lighting a test fire. And watch real carefully when we light this test fire, because it proved to be a very interesting example why it's good to do a test fire. So we have a fire going. It's really hard to see right now. The flames are quite small. You can see little wisps of smoke, and but fairly soon you'll be able to see the fire a little bit more. And now you're starting to see the flames come up a little bit. But now watch what happens as this fire begins to burn, and look at what the smoke's doing and where the smoke's going. It's not at all a steady westerly wind. And see that little push is a bounce off of the trees, and the flame lengths. By the flame lengths alone, you're seeing relatively long flame lengths for what should be a backing fire. And here we get a push from the south, and that fire fans out both towards the west. Look at that, going out to the west and going out to the north. And so this fire is not at all acting like it's got a westerly push towards it. And we're looking at this, and we're letting this test fire go for quite a long time to see if the wind is going to settle down. And it's doing the opposite. It's just getting worse. And you can see it, that rate of spread expanding fairly rapidly towards the north. And so we're not at all getting what we need and what we think we were expecting. And so we're deciding, put the fire out. This is just not going. Now watch what we do when we put the fire out. Now the first person's coming in and they're not positioned, but now I'm coming in and I'm working at the base of the black and working at in the black, but getting my squirting at the base of the fire. Now eventually the second person will come into the black because I've directed them to do so. That's where you want to use your fire to put out the fire. You can do it very easily with the pump cans, but if you're in the black, you can get your water right at the base of the fire. And note that nobody's going in front of the fire. They're waiting and putting it out on the edges and backing each other up. So we're putting out this test fire. So the fire didn't do what we were thinking it should do. And so we're going to re-strategize and say, okay, the wind directions was not what we were thinking. We were getting some southerly pushes from that wind. And so we're going to change our strategy once this test fire is out. So now we're out, and we've got everything dead out. We're double checking it, stomping out the last bit. So now we have a new strategy. We're going to play it like a southwest wind. And so our point of origin is now changed, and we're going to see if that works. And our points of commitment will now change. At least point of commitment number 2 will change. Point of commitment number 1 will stay the same, and the tie point will shift over to the corner. So the tie point is still the point farthest upwind, and our ignition strategy is still the same, going to points of commitment and then to the tie point. But what has changed is we're planning on a southwest wind rather than a west wind. This is all determined by what we found with the real weather at the original point of origin. So now we're doing a test fire. We're reigniting at a new point of origin, and we're going to see how that fire goes. If this fire doesn't go well from this point, we'll probably are done for the day, and we'll see what happens. So we have our test fire going. The fire is more controllable. You see it's not shifting its directions, that it's moving quite as much. So it's a much more tenable circumstance right here. And so, but we're taking our time, waiting to see what the weather is going to do. You can see that smoke rising. When it gets above the trees, it's going more to the south, going to the northeast, which would be from a southwest wind. So that's doing what we thought it would do based on the first test fire. And so we're seeing if there's too much creep on the grass breaks. And now we're beginning to be comfortable with this. And so Joe Lacey's line is beginning to extend towards the south. And we're going to start moving Rob Nuri's line going towards the west. And you can see that beginning to blacken in. And so now we're beginning to develop our corner. And so our first objective, now that we've decided that we're comfortable with the fire behavior in this new point of origin, and see what a difference it makes to be at a point of origin that is true to the actual weather that you have on the site. This fire is behaving very, very differently from the test fire that we lit originally. And so our next order of business, once we've done the test fire, once we're sure that our brakes are going to work the way we want them to work, is we want to secure our corner, which means that we want to make sure that we've got a blackened area at the corner and everything is quite secure. So we're going to keep moving slowly. You can see that they're using flappers to put out fire, trying not to use too much water so that we're using that valuable resource, keeping it in reserve and not using it. And we're slowly expanding along our two lines. And for the most part, the wind is still a little bit variable. Sometimes there's a westerly or even a northwesterly wind in there, but for the most part, you would expect a little bit of instability in terms of what the smoke does in a corner like that with trees right next to it. You'd expect some bouncing off the trees and that sort of thing. Remember when we were talking about that with fire behavior? Now we've got a little bit of a gust coming out of the northwest, and you can see Rob's line, which is on the left. It's all of a sudden burning up hot because he's got more of a flank fire rather than a backing fire here. Joe Lacey's line on the right is working as a backing fire still. And so that works to our favor because as long as it doesn't challenge Joe's line on the right, we're fine. And that's why Joe's line is a lot further ahead than Rob's line is to protect against anything that would move from the southwest more strongly. So you're seeing a lot of interesting local behavior, local effect on fire behavior as driven by a wind that is relatively stable, but in the particular location next to woods, you're seeing some tendency for that wind to eddy around, to make a circle when it gets light. But we can use that to our advantage as long as we're comfortable that it's not a true wind shift. And you can tell it's not a true wind shift because as soon as the smoke gets above the trees, it's still going away from us to the north and east. So now we're getting into a point where we've got a well-defined corner, but we want to burn out that corner a little bit. We need to secure the corner, and we're going to start getting ready to secure that corner as we move along, just to make sure that we've got a nice, good black area that the burn is anchored on. And so it will take a little bit of preparation. So now I'm moving over to get ready to light a strip fire. So I'm at the point of origin and I'm carrying the drip torch. And I'm trying to figure out, is this a good time to light a strip fire and to burn out the corner and what we need to do. So Rob's line has 3 people on it. Joe's line has 2 people, and I'm kind of floating in the middle. I'm at the point of origin. So Rob's line is mostly lighting flanking fire, whereas Joe's line is mostly lighting backing fire. Joe's line is again on the right, and Rob's line is on the left. I'm trying to stand where I can see both the lines and see what the fire behavior is on both these lines. So now I'm moving over to the head of Joe's line and I'm going to do a strip fire moving from the right over to the left because I want to widen out the black in that corner. And we'll talk more about what we achieve by widening that line out. But because I'm going to light a strip fire, I'm asking Rob to send one of his crew members back towards the point of origin so that they can look for the chance of any spot fires to occur. So now that crew member is moving back towards the point of origin. Once they're in position, Joe has dropped a crew member back a little bit because if the strip fire I lit lights any spot fires, it's going to occur where those 2 people are. So now I'm lighting a strip fire across. Notice I'm walking very rapidly because you can see that the fire gets hot very quickly. And so it's important that I stay well ahead of that. So you can see a head fire, you can see dramatic flame lengths now, as opposed to what we had before. Now this spot fire, or this strip fire, is not going straight over to Rob's line where Rob is located right now. And I'll show you why, or you'll see why that is the case. So this burns out. We had no problems with spot fires. Now we've got a clearer corner, and our only points of risk are the two tips of our line. So where Rob is standing with his crew members and where Joe is standing with his returning crew member. Now watch Rob's line on the left. When we get a little bit of eddy of wind, the reason why I didn't go all the way over to his line is because I was worried about those fickle winds on the coming from a northwest kind of position. See how quickly Rob's line is burning in and straightening out that corner. And so there wasn't a need to strip out that corner because I was pretty sure that we were going to get these eddies of wind that do the job for us. So now we have a corner that is secure. And so basically our only points of risk are here at the head of Joe's line and here at the edge of, or at the tip of Rob's line. All of this is pretty secure, even if a fairly hot fire comes towards it. And you see these flames, this is a flanking fire, and it's filling in that corner very nicely. So now we've fast forward creating our burn breaks, coming up to the points of commitment 1 and 2. And this is the position of the black line when we first arrive at the points of commitment 1 and 2. And I want you to remember this line because we'll show it again when we actually move to tie to show how much the blacken area has changed while we're waiting at the point of commitment to get ready to move to tie. And so the first thing that we want to do before we're ready to move to tie is Rob's line needs to widen out the corner because it's quite narrow at the beginning there. And so you'll see he's lit a fire along that edge and you can see it slowly burning out. So right now we've got more of a southwest wind or even a south wind, and that line is burning out, but quite slowly. But you do see that black creeping in. You see right here. That area is beginning to slowly widen out so that this will soon be all black. And at the same time, Rob is asking his crew members to go back and refill the drip torch and refill back cans so that we have full back cans and full drip torch when we're ready to move to tie. And so that's one of the first things to do is to check to make sure all of our resources are replenished. And those resources include crew stamina. So this is a hot fire, and we want to make sure that the crew members are rehydrated and that they're good to go. I'm standing at the new tie point right here. And so I'm also asking them if they know where the new tie point is. I'm asking if all the crew members are accounted for and if everybody understands the new ignition plan. And how is the crew feeling? Are they ready to complete the fire? So those are some of the things on my checklist to make sure. We now have a nice secure black area here at the corner. It's very secure over here. And so that's good. And so a final thing that we need to assess is, do we have a big enough black area throughout the whole unit to stop the head fire? And also, have we checked back to our points of origin to make sure everything is secure back to our points of origin? So we're going to check on the size of our black area to contain, is it big enough to contain that ring fire? And we're going to check on moving back to the point of origin. So those two things are going to occur. And you'll see them. It will be kind of hard to see a person walking back, but we'll demonstrate that that's happening here momentarily. You can see Joe's line now has pretty much a flanking fire here. Rob's line is pretty much mostly a backing fire here, so you can barely even see the flames because they're so short in length. So this flanking fire would indicate pretty much a south to a southwest wind. We still think we're having pretty much a southwest wind here, but you can see a pretty strong flanking fire here, which would suggest even a more of a westerly wind here, so that we're getting somewhat of a westerly wind as well as a southwest wind. So now we're going to check to make sure that we're clear all the way back to the origin. And so both lines are sending a crew member back. They're walking all the way back to the origin, reporting in that everything's clear back to the origin. There's no spot fires, there's no creeping on the line. And then they're coming back and we should be ready to move to tie. So once they're back and everybody's checked in and we know that we have a big enough black line, and we're clear back to our origin, we're ready to move to tie. So I'm in position to send people once I get a clear report, and we will be moving to tie momentarily. So it's taken a long time to get to this position. We've got a little bit more than half of the unit burned, and we've probably used about 2/3 to 4/5 of the total time invested in doing this prescribed burn just to get to this point. Things will go very quickly once we're ready to move to tie. So here's the new black line is the light green, the old black line is the dark green, and that's the distance that the fire has moved. So not a whole lot. The flanking fire, it moved further than in the backing fire, but basically it gives you an idea that you can afford to take the time to get things right at the points of commitment before you move to tie. So I'm at the tie point. I can direct both crews and make sure that they are safe, and now they're moving to tie. You can see Joe's line is there. He's already sending his torch and they're coming. And now Rob's torch is moving along that line. Rob's standing back to watch what's happening. I'm watching both torches and trying to make sure that they meet at the same place. You can see that both torches are moving briskly because the fire gets hot very, very quickly. And both torches are lighting basically head fires. Now, once we've ringed, watch what the fire behavior does. It's really quite fascinating, I think. So now our two torches have met, they've ringed, they'll put out their torches and back off because that line gets very hot. Now, as that fire starts coming in, notice that the fire all the way around in a complete ring begins to pull inwards. So everywhere around the perimeter of the current fire is burning inwards because the fire now is hot enough, it's creating its own weather. And that's exactly what you want with a ring fire because you're concentrating all of that heat and energy in the middle of your unit to the degree possible. So everything's burning in until it all meets. You can see once we finally ringed it, we actually had more of a south wind than we did having a southwest wind. And so one of the reasons why a ring fire is useful is when you don't have stable winds, a ring fire protects you as much as you can for changes in wind direction. And you can see the smoke is rising very well. It's dispersing very, very well. And all of that heat energy, all of the embers are retained right into the middle of the unit. And it's pretty well burned out very quickly. Now, in terms of the mopping up, there was a lot of detritus that was left on our upwind line. And so you're going to see a fair amount of effort that we need to do to put out the backing fire on that upwind line. And that's one of the reasons why you make sure that you are full of equipment is because we had a fair amount of mopping up to do with our remaining water. And so I'm basically in the middle of that, and I'm trying to slow down the rate of spread of this fire to make sure that we can get other people in to put it out. So I'm slowing down that rate of spread. And then the person on the right over here is starting to put it out, but they need to learn to work in the black as they go. I'm just slowing down the fire, so being in the black isn't as important. And Joe's going to come up and work on this side to put it out. So I'm just keeping the fire from backing into this taller vegetation, which would be more difficult to deal with. And you can see how much fuel is in this break. So Joe is coming in and putting out the fire, and I'm just continuing to slow it down to give Joe time to work from my right, and to give the other crew member, I think it was Adam, time to work from my left. So this is the proper way to deal with this. By being in the black, you can get your water at the base of the fire, and that is much more effective at putting out the fire as you go along. So this was a prescribed fire that we did to illustrate a ring fire technique in relatively heavy grass fuels, and we hope you find that useful. I'm going to show you another video, and it's just a great way to illustrate how important it is to understand fire behavior, especially as it comes to keeping yourself safe when you're in a watch out situation, meaning that you're in unburned fuel within a burned unit. So I'm going to show you a part of this video from a different fire that was done at the International Crane Foundation to illustrate that point, and to show it a couple times so that you can see actually what's happening. So I'll show it first without commentary, and we'll talk about it a little bit and show it again. So Andy is going to light a strip fire on here, and he's doing a strip fire coming across. Now that seems to be pretty straightforward. But let's watch it again. See how this fire behavior has changed radically? So there's an eddy of a wind coming over this hill, and it's creating a vertical eddy. So it's coming in this direction. See, this is a backing fire here. So that means the wind is coming in this direction, but it's shifting. It's coming over and under and back. So you got a backing fire here, but you got a heading fire right here. And so you're seeing evidence of vertical eddy. And Andy saw that before you could see this dramatic fire, and he knew that he had a change in weather fire behavior coming up, and he got out of that area. If you didn't know what was happening, this would be a very dangerous situation. So let me go back and you'll see it again. So this is the setup. Here's Andy getting ready to do a strip fire, and he was going to burn from here to here to make a straight line here. And you can see how the wind is blowing this way. So that plan of action makes perfectly good sense. He's lighting a strip fire to go like this. And this is still a backing fire, and this is a backing fire, and the smoke is going in this direction. So all of that makes a lot of sense. But watch, when you start to see just a little bit of evidence of this fire behavior to change, and Andy, because he knew he was in a watch out situation, because he's in unburned fuel near fire, he saw that change and quickly found his exit area. In fact, he probably knew where his exit area was going to be if this fire behavior changed. So watch it, how quickly he reacts and how quickly the fire changes its behavior. So he's going to start his strip fire. Smoke looks good. Now look at that starting to lay back. So he sees it and he exits, and see that fire coming back. So he didn't even need to do that strip fire because of this. And see that change in fire behavior? Look what the smoke is doing. But you see, once the smoke gets up above the trees, it's going back that way. So you can see, because of the smoke, you can see that vertical eddy. And now it's laying back on itself. So it's really critical anytime that you're lighting fire in an area where there is unburned fuel to pay attention to what that fire is doing and always know where your escape route is going to be in that watch out sort of situation. So that's the main thing that I wanted to illustrate here. So let's stop this. I hope that you find these two videos useful. I'm happy to make them available should you want to view them more. They're readily available on the my course website that I teach, and we can make them available to you once we meet here in May. So thank you very much, and I look forward to talking with you on the next segment. Bye-bye.